Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Kraus, a healthcare investor with Bessemer Venture Partners, and I am super excited to be here today with our entire healthcare, pharma, and life science investment team, Sophia, Morgan, and Andrew, to share our annual healthcare predictions for 2025. We'll be unpacking key trends shaping the future of healthcare, what entrepreneurs, executives, and investors need to know to stay ahead, and each of us will spotlight one standout prediction for healthcare innovation in the year ahead. If you want to see the full list, please go to our website, bvp.com/atlas, to check out all 10 of our predictions in our annual report. But we'll keep things snappy for all the healthcare founders and investors out there. So let's dive in. I am going to be the first to start with my prediction, guys. I'm curious what you think about it. My prediction is that Trump's support for ICRAs, which I'll explain what those are, may actually strengthen the Obamacare exchanges that he previously tried to eliminate. This is a bit of a wonky public policy prediction, but it has big impact for our healthcare industry. What are ICRAs? ICRAs are defined as individual coverage healthcare reimbursement arrangements. That's what the acronym stands for. They're actually first created under the first Trump administration. And essentially, what they do is allow employers to provide tax-free dollars to employees for individual health insurance purchase. So instead of providing a group health plan like Bessemer provides all of us healthcare provided by and paid for by Bessemer, instead they would give Andrew, Sophia, and Morgan a lump sum of money, whatever that is, and myself, and they allow us each individually to go out and buy health insurance that fits our needs and the costs that we want to spend on that. And my prediction here is that actually a lot of these ICRAs are going to be administered via the existing healthcare exchange chassis, which was created under Obama, which in Trump's administration, he really tried to eliminate hard, and worked hard to do. But now I think because he supports ICRAs, which is a very market-driven, consumer-driven, individual-driven policy, that actually a lot of these policies, which the market predicts up to 45% of the employer group market could move to ICRAs over the next decade or so, could actually strengthen these exchanges. Curious what you guys think of this prediction. Will it come true? And more importantly, if it does come true, what should entrepreneurs, investors think about how it'll impact the broader healthcare market? What do you think, Morgan? I'll turn over to you first.
I'm going to ask the skeptical question, which is why is our health insurance still tied to our employment? But I don't know if we have time to get into all of that on this call.
Yeah, that's the case, right? I think 80% of the time, most employees don't want the health insurance that the decision maker at the employer chooses. And maybe the ICRAs change that. What do we think? Do we think there's going to be more individuals getting involved finally? We're like, that is the holy grail. What do you think, Sophia and Andrew?
I do think that 25 is going to be a critical year to see this. In the short term, we need to figure out what the impact of subsidies will be in the exchanges and what does that mean for ICRA. And then how do you increase optionality, more plans in certain states to have availability of employees to have good options. And the other thing that comes to mind and that entrepreneurs are already thinking about is really you're putting the burden on the consumer, right? If you're shifting that from your
You are.
employer to the employee, what does that mean and how to make that experience better? I think those are the companies that are really going to win, is thinking about how to manage the consumer and support them, because now they're going to have a lot more burden on that out of pocket costs. And
I totally agree with that. Very complex decision. Andrew, Bessemer were to
Yeah.
say, hey, no longer are we going to choose your healthcare insurance, but we're going to give you a lump sum of money to go figure out what's best for you. Which would you choose?
So personally, as someone who actually understands the healthcare and way that is probably not representative of the broader public, I'd be excited about that opportunity to figure out what fits well for me. I think as
You
much
have an HSA right now. You're a big
I don't
HSA
think it's
user.
fair. I
Yeah.
don't know. I chose an HSA plan because I wanted to get the triple tax benefits. I also wanted to have the flexibility to think about where I'm spending money and be a little bit more proactive in my decision making for me and my family. I think for the general consumer, this is something that may get forced upon them if employers decide this is the best way to contain healthcare costs. And you hear this from every employer right now, is the rise in premium spend and the cost of healthcare for them is just becoming astronomical, growing double-digit percentages year over year. And if this is another tool in the toolkit to reduce that increase in spend over time, that may end up forcing these types of plans upon the consumer, and then they're going to have to get smarter on this. I totally agree with Sophia, though, that this is going to be pretty complex for the average consumer. And so having tools that allow a smarter decision-making process is going to be absolutely critical for this to be something that consumers don't revolt against, and is something that is actually beneficial for the consumer rather than an additional burden or an additional cost perceived to them.
Final point I'll make on this is that For entrepreneurs out there who are looking for spaces, if you think about a parallel, what happened in terms of how companies used to manage pension funds and retirement dollars, investment dollars accounts, it used to be a defined benefit where the employer would manage it. And then all of a sudden, a company called Fidelity came around and turned it from a defined benefit to defined contribution, where the money was then pushed into 401ks to allow and other vehicles to allow individuals to invest. And so if you think that's the parallel in the healthcare market, which is equally as large, for all entrepreneurs, this is a massive trend. And we at Bessemer and other investors look for massive trends. I think this is a really interesting space to be pursuing opportunities. I hope this prediction comes true, but I agree with everyone. It's going to be complicated. It's going to take a while, but look forward to some movement in 2025. All right, Sophia, what's your prediction?
So hear me out. So the care system, the caregiver system, home health and home care, we can define them separately, but at another time, it's going to face an unprecedented strain, particularly because the boomer generation is continuing to age, what we're calling the silver tsunami. So you'll tell me, oh my God, this has been happening for a long time. Why now? What's happening that gets us excited this year in 2025 to see changes here? On top of an already strained workforce, burned out, overworked, and underpaid, we're facing actually a risk of mass deportations in this country, particularly with the incoming administration and some of the immigration policies. And this is only going to increase the strain in the system. On top of that, we're seeing a lot of reimbursement declines in the categories. We need to figure out a way to create net new workforce. And how do we sustain the change that's going to happen in the increase in number of Medicare beneficiaries? I'm very excited in 2025 to think about new strategies that tackle this net new workforce problem. Some ideas that come to mind are AI aides and companions, thinking about how do you monitor in the real world and digitally to support nurses and caregivers in providing care. Business in a box and entrepreneurship, so supporting clinician or caregiver entrepreneurs to start their own business, to get more people into this industry. And how do we increase new payment programs that can get better payment for the folks doing this? I'm curious if you guys have any other ideas, and if you agree with it, why not?
I'd add one other sort of macro force, which I think this is a really interesting prediction. There's the silver tsunami wave. There's the fact that a lot of these PCAs, personal care assistants, tend to be potentially, some of them are in the population that might be deported. I hope not, but that might be the case, decreasing the supply. I'd say the other thing that's a market force is just innovation. Frankly, we have the silver tsunami is now people are used to using digital devices that actually have an iPhone, are more familiar with wearables. And that wasn't the case before. Like we've always thought this, our collective Bessemer investment team, always healthcare team, have thought that, gosh, this population, what a great use for technology to remotely monitor these folks, as you said, to have AI assistants. 10 years ago, my dad, who's 90, was just learning how to use text, right? Just today. Now you've got people who are aging in 55, 65. They really are digitally savvy. So I think that's also a huge macro force that allows this for a why now too, Sophia.
Yeah.
I sure hope this one comes true. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, just to state the fact that my parents are in their 70s, and when they come visit, my dad is on his iPad looking at Facebook constantly. Like
There we
Facebook is
go.
a new productive channel for going after seniors from a direct consumer standpoint and getting engagement around them. They're the fastest growing demographic in some of these social media channels. I can totally see the shift in comfort with technology having an impact on the why now. And I also agree with first point around the transition of the evolution in technology for AI having a potential impact to have a really robust and high quality experience for those types of AI agents that wasn't possible 2 years ago. And so I think that may be an enabler that allows us to finally tackle some of the challenges in this space.
I think a lot about too our work in upskilling and using AI as an upskilling tool, particularly in clinical workforces. And as we think about subclinical, like just caring for someone in a home environment and needing to think through all of those things, we see parents being voracious adopters of AI coaches for how to care for a newborn. I think the same could be true at the end of life. And if we could bring everybody up to a certain level of comfort doing so, I think that can hopefully encourage more families to be able to keep their loved ones at home for longer. And then I think the other thing that's an interesting trend here, Sophia, is just the increase in technologies we have for monitoring folks across modalities. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you never felt good leaving your parent at home if you're just getting a simple heart rate and maybe an occasional EKG. But if you actually had computer vision to let you know as we're seeing with many systems, that they've fallen or that they might need something or they're under duress, I think we can deploy the technology to give people that extra level of comfort, again, that they already have in many other areas of your life. I think, Andrew, as you showed me that when your kids go to school, you could even check in and see what's going on. So we should certainly have this for our older adults.
In a world where you consider, if you think about a PCA, even at the end of life, right? People still want to, most seniors want to remain in their home. And probably most of them are eligible to stay in their home if they don't have a severe chronic disease. And the concern is, the sandwich generation, the ones who are thinking about your parents, your elderly parents, is you're concerned about a fall, right? But half the time that staying at home is probably in sleeping hours, or maybe a third of the time. And so you can imagine this world where actually and being a PCA is a local business, right? Because you got to get to the house. But you could imagine a world where a PCA could actually, you almost have what they did in teleradiology back in the days, like actually have a monitor where they could, through multimodal methods and AI, could actually maybe care for, instead of one person as a one-to-one relationship and you're there 24 hours a day, maybe it becomes a 1-to-2 or 1-to-3 relationship. And that actually could expand the workforce, just that alone.
To wrap it up, I do think though, like the long-term trend, I believe that we're going to see a lot more technology here in 25. We can also see that it's already being used in hospitals, in rehabilitation centers, in skilled nursing facilities where maybe the variables are a lot more constrained.
Yeah.
But super excited to see entrepreneurs innovating in the spaces.
That's a really great point, because we've seen across a lot of different technology and solutions, what starts in the inpatient, in the acute care center, moves down the spectrum. So I do think some of the things that are used in hospitals, while there are more constraints, you say, Sophia, should move into the home. So let's hope. We all need it for our parents, and eventually I'm probably the nearest, maybe me. All right, moving on. Here we go. Andrew, we're going to talk about life science and drug development and discovery. That you lead it up. You work on it with Morgan. What's your prediction for 2025?
We're in the beginning of a decade-long transition of newer modalities that we've been seeing for a while and been talking about for a while, like CRISPR gene editing, gene therapy, immunotherapy, transitioning from rare disease focus to chronic disease focus, and literally coming for the masses if they're going after obesity and other conditions like that. And in my mind, in the analogy, I think that's hard to fully grasp in today's world. We always think about drug development as focused historically on both small molecules and antibody drug discovery. But antibodies weren't discovered until 1975, and the first drug approval wasn't until 1986. That was less than 40 years ago. CRISPR-Cas9 was first talked about as a gene editing tool in 20. And so I think we are now getting to a maturation phase where you're starting to see this shift in the comfort level with the technology, some of the delivery challenges being solved for, some of the safety and ethical concerns being solved for, where they're no longer going to solely focus on rare diseases, where there's still plenty of opportunity, but also start going towards some of these larger, more chronic indications, partly buoyed by the fact that there's a lot of excitement about large chronic conditions within the biotech ecosystem right now, given the success of GLP-1s and the potential market size of being $100 billion over time. There's a lot of interest in seeing where else can these technologies be applied. And I think there's a potential opportunity over the next decade for these somewhat niche-y modalities being used ubiquitously to treat many different diseases in a hyper-personalized way. And so I think we're just going to see more and more of that trend in 2025, and a much larger comfort level with exploring and investing in larger conditions for these newer modalities. Curious if anyone thinks I'm too early on that trend, too late on that trend, or where you might see the market evolving. And maybe I'll turn it to Morgan first. And then I also want to get the perspective from Steve, as someone who's been a biotech investor for longer than me, what he saw in that evolution and in some of the other types of modalities and how they transition over time. But maybe Morgan, just curious your reaction on that first.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think a lot of this is being spawned from the success of what's happened in the metabolic medicine class and acknowledging that we can develop therapies against these large chronic indications. I also am thinking just a lot about what is the definition of a large chronic indication. My heart disease is different from your heart disease, is different from anyone's. And we now also have a lot more diagnostic infrastructure for being able to look at the genomic signatures within chronic disease. And so if you're looking in particular kinds of heart failure, we can now segment it through so many different sub causes of that heart failure and really stratify these patients on a molecular level, which again, if you're taking a fraction or percentage of an already large space, it's still going to be a large number of patients to treat and to care for. So I think there's a lot of really exciting reasons within that. I guess I'd flip the question back to you and ask, are there any specialty areas or big indications that you're particularly excited about as we head into the new year?
I think areas where there's significant genetic validation, and so cardiovascular, cardiometabolic disease are clearly areas of interest. Immunology is another area where we're seeing a large focus on it, immunotherapy having a potential impact or cell therapy having an impact in those indications. But then I think there's also opportunity in the neuroscience space, where decades behind where we have been in oncology and other types of indications, where there has been a whole host of data delineating genetic markers, and we're starting to see that evolve in a way that's going to be really productive and fruitful in the coming decade, with a ton of opportunity to treat a lot of patients in a really effective way.
One thought, I don't know as much about the biotech industry as you all, but as I think about kind of standard of care and like the bar that these new drugs are going to have to hit, I think is going to be a lot higher, just given that there's drugs out there for this. And they're going to have to be like best in class. The best example is the GLP-1, right? You saw kind of holy grail outcomes to be able to see the impact that it's had. So I do think that the bar is going to be a lot higher for those drugs.
I think that's possible. I totally agree. And I think that comes from a place of being concerned about potential safety issues, and then also potentially from an economic standpoint of how do we pay for these historically very expensive therapies. Just given the specificity of delivery, we're starting to see some of the other bolus of data we're seeing in terms of the safety profile of some of these. I do think we're going to slowly transition to a place where there's a greater level of comfort in these larger indications. And it might then come down to a patient and physician choice of, would you rather take a one and done opportunity, or do you want to be on this for a chronic period of time and injecting yourself every week or every couple of weeks? And so that may be something that's a personal decision that is made, and there likely will be an opportunity for those, assuming it is safe. And I totally agree that bar needs to be high. I think there is a burden of proof on how efficacious these need to be relative to standard of care with the same level of safety, especially if you're going after large indications. Point very well taken.
Yeah, significant quality of life improvement is a good point.
Steve, as the old guy who has been investing both in biotech and health tech for a long time, what do you think about this as a potential theme or trend?
It's funny. I feel like I'm like Michael Jordan. I'm like an old guy trying to play basketball against Anthony Edwards here. So I'm dating myself. And by the way, I'm no Michael Jordan. But I guess I had the same questions. It sounds like motherhood and apple pie. This is amazing, right? Better technology, more targeted delivery, presumably better efficacy and safety profile, much larger TAMs. What's the risk that I'm going to put it back at you? What's the main risk that entrepreneurs should be thinking about? Because obviously everyone should be flocking to this given the market sizes. Like what keeps you up at night about this prediction, Andrew and Morgan?
Yeah, I think it really is that burden of proof on safety. And also, what does the target product profile need to look like in order to be commercially viable in these populations? And I think there's likely going to be a scenario where it is reserved for later stage refractory patients in some of these larger conditions. And then as the safety data emerges, it is likely going to be studied in larger, earlier stage in the progression of disease conditions and patients. And that will slowly allow for the comfort level that we all need to see. But in 1986, the first antibody was used for kidney rejection as an immunosuppressant. It was thought of as a very short period therapy because no one thought you'd ever be dosing those chronically at that point in time. And we've clearly made the transition before. I think the question is, how long is it going to take to get that comfort level? And I think we're now at a point where I see a lot of opportunity to define that path as an entrepreneur, where you need to be really mindful of those concerns and that burden of proof that Sophia talked about.
Yeah. And I think pricing too would be my guess, right? At the other end, once you get the drug works and gets it, like, how are you going to price these things? Because
For sure.
we already seen one GLP-1 is going to just be GLP-1 is going to be a huge cost burden. But then again, you think about, to Sophia referenced, all of the gold standard data, not only had in weight loss, but then you see all the derivative impacts on other areas of health, cardiology, nephrology. Even now they're talking about, and Morgan, you probably can speak to this deeper, like its impact on the neurology space, dementia, Alzheimer's. Holy cow. So maybe, I don't know, maybe if you have a great one of these drugs targeted for heart health, like, holy cow, we know there's so many downstream impacts that maybe pricing does withstand, and you can price because there's so many beyond the heart. There's so many other beneficial.
No, we need new value-based payment models for a lot of these drugs.
Yeah.
Left for another prediction that we won't be discussing, but you should be reading about.
There we go.
Yeah.
So once we get these drugs approved, next year we're going to talk about value-based care payment models for these drugs. I like it.
Well, there's certainly an opportunity on the health tech side for value-based payment models, thinking through the logistics of these much more complicated therapies. And we won't go into depth on that, but I definitely agree that there's an opportunity to tackle there as well.
I would just add two other thoughts that are coming to mind as you all are talking, which is like, one, let's not confuse the word common for simple, right? These are common diseases that are highly complex. highly heterogeneous, as we're even seeing in the metabolic medicine space. So
Yep.
really making sure we're getting to the right patients. Again, even if it's still a large number of patients, but figuring out what biomarkers we should be looking as we're subsegmenting these common diseases, right? Alzheimer's is not a monolithic presentation by any means. And actually, we have some good genetic data there. The other thing I was just thinking about as you all were talking in terms of recouping costs is I think the trials for a lot of these large indication drugs are going to be very expensive to run.
Mm,
So really thinking about how to resource development effectively, I think should be top of mind for any companies that are going after these areas.
that's a really
Great
good one.
point.
All right, Morgan, your prediction.
All right. So got to wrap it up with some AI as if we didn't talk about it enough so far.
2024, the year of AI and health. I missed that. I think I fell asleep. All right, go. What are we going to do in 2025 in AI?
I think we're on the start of a really interesting trajectory. So this might be a prediction we also roll forward, but really multimodal AI revolutionizing measurement in medicine. And I wish I could put the period after that because while that's all happening technically, I think the truth is payment models are lagging far behind. And if anything, the gap is widening between what we're able to do technically in AI and healthcare and what we're actually paying for and what's actually happening on the ground. And so I think 2025 is the year where we really face this commercial reality check. The technology we now have to integrate imaging, omics, notes, labs, audio, video, it's matured tremendously just over the last year. But as we appreciate the insurance reimbursement infrastructure, which is the main way to get this technology into the hands of physicians and patients, just hasn't kept up at all. And as we are seeing more of these technologies procure and obtain CPT codes, that's all a great headline. But the reality is it's a fight at the end of the day to get that stuff covered for very narrowly segmented patient populations. It's not for all, as we might hope. I think we're really going to grapple with this over the coming year. And I hope what we realize, though, is that diagnostic AI has significant potential to actually bend the cost curve, really reimagine how we're caring for a lot of the diseases that hopefully Andrew's investments are going to treat. But it's not enough to secure the CPT code. The implementation barriers are going to be very real. And it's going to be the companies and teams that are really focusing on these last mile things. These are not AI problems now, right? These are blocking and tackling healthcare operator problems that we shouldn't underestimate.
Hey, Morgan, can I ask you a question? You said revolutionizing the measurement in medicine. What do you mean by that? And can you give us some examples?
Yeah, so just how we basically classify disease at its most fundamental basis, right? If you have a particular drug that's going after, let's pick one of our common diseases. Let's pick like amyloidosis. Oh, that's a rare disease. Let's pick like a bigger disease, like a cardiomyopathy, for example. And you have only one way to measure that disease. It turns out there could be many different drivers of that one common presentation of that cardiomyopathy. And so the ability to have tools that are either AI-based, lab-based, imaging-based, we've always used like single fighters in medicine to define disease. And I think what's unique about AI is you can kitchen sink all of the things that happen to you in a diagnostic process now and really come up with these rich phenotypes, these rich descriptors of disease in a way that gets at the root cause of what's driving it. And I think we're able to do that in a way we've never been able to do until now in 2025. But this technology will not see the light of day until we can figure out how to actually sustain it financially in a health system environment.
It's interesting because I love this prediction. I want to ask the team here. Like one of the, I've always thought the reticence to adopt AI sometimes might be because the fear AI might replace pathologists or radiologists, right, on the clinical side. But now you're talking about actually diagnosis, right? And you talked about one of the challenges here is there's the whole machination of the healthcare industrial complex that you have to go through, reimbursement, right, regulatory approval. But who's at risk here? Who's going to fight this? I understand why a pathologist or radiologist might be fearful of AI doing first reads because it could replace a lot of their work. But like here, who's fighting this, Morgan or team, on this prediction? I don't quite know immediately off the top of my head.
I think the issue to me is that you diagnose, but then what do you do? And who's going to pay for that? And I think that's probably one of the biggest obstacles that Morgan mentioned is how do we pay for this? And how do we learn from, okay, technology works, but how does it get adopted? And in what kind of part of the workflow does it work best? So then you align those incentives for people to use them, who's going to pay for it, and who's going to get the benefit out of it.
So it doesn't come to fruition because there's whatever the diagnosis leads to, it's not paid for, and the diagnosis is not paid for. Is that the point?
Yeah, or it's already being diagnosed one way today. So you need to change behavior to be diagnosed differently. And if it goes to Morgan's point that you're like subdividing and understanding a little bit like more granularly a particular disease, the so what, right? Of what are we going to do with that insight and how are we going to treat that particular disease? More for better drugs and more personalized medicine.
Yeah, I think Sophia is spot on with the fact that for this to be reimbursed and adopted, there needs to be a so what and an action to take for it to sit within that industrial complex that you said. I think if we're making an analogy to liquid biopsies, a lot of these companies aspire to be a test that I'd want to take every 6 months to see if I have an early stage tumor that I should be treating. And I think the magical idea behind that is really powerful and would have a massive impact on the industry. There's a lot of pushback on, are you going to pay for that for every single American every 6 months? Holy cow, that's expensive. And the ROI back and the potential risk of false positives that are going to lead to a whole downstream impact on additional cost and spend in the healthcare system is really difficult to sift through. And so I suspect what Morgan's talking about is going to start with something that's very hyper specific to a certain disease, a certain high value disease where either catching it early or there's a net new insight that's derived from these multimodal AI models that allow you to treat the disease much more effectively than you would have otherwise, or monitor it and adjust treatment more effectively. That is the starting point of where that comes into play. And then hopefully we'll expand the value proposition and the use case and action item that Sophia is talking about in the coming years and decades.
I also wonder if there's an opportunity to learn from the first generation of digital therapeutics companies and software medical devices and how do they get adopted, what that process was and the risks there to learn in the second wave of AI diagnostics and more precision medicine.
That's a really good point because we admire that those entrepreneurs who really in the first wave of digital therapeutics, I always said they had the burden of both life science companies and they had the burden of digital health companies. What I meant by that is they had to do all the work that the companies that Andrew and Morgan invest in, preclinical scientific studies, regulatory approval. And then they had to do all the work that the companies that Sophia, myself, and Morgan invest in, and Andrew too, on the digital health side, where it's, okay, you got to do all that. And then you got to go and hire sales folks and get physicians to adopt it and get consumers to believe in it and get paid and do it at a good gross margin. But we really admire those first generation digital therapeutic entrepreneurs because they really did pave the way. And I think it's a really good call out, Sophia, to future folks who are looking at the space to actually go and talk to those folks and learn from them. Corey from Pear and Eddie from Achille are two great folks. They've done a lot of the hard work and hopefully it paves the way for the future generation because this is a big trend that Morgan's predicting.
Yeah, I think one other thing I completely agree to learn from the folks who've been there, done that. I think also learn from the folks who are doing it in life sciences, right? If you think about Tempus and all the work they've done in oncology and now moving beyond, there is someone who cares about this, which is a biopharma company. And I think as we realize this like future vision of what we defined in 2006 was this learning health system where each patient teaches us something about our collective knowledge in medicine. Like we have the technology to build that world today. We just don't have the business models to build it. And life sciences has the business models to build it. How do we get the payer and provider world to appreciate that? And I think in the meantime, if I were to make the sub prediction for this year, I think in the meantime, we will see more multimodal AI companies coming to market, more technology spinning out of labs that are interesting, but they're going to be more operational. And so I think that'll look more like the ambient monitoring that we talked about with computer vision for older adults or for patients that are admitted. It might look more like supply chain optimization and monitoring, or maybe even we'll see more in the robotic surgery space that is inherently multimodal.
All right. So it's no longer 4 predictions. It's now 6 that you got for the price of 4. This is awesome, guys. I had a great time. As one of the things I love about working with the three of you is I always learn a lot and I have a lot of fun doing it. It feels like it's a really great time to be starting companies. It feels like the markets are back. It feels like it's a really great time to scale your company. And it feels hopefully like the IPO markets, which at the end of the day are important for a lot of our companies to access, are going to be open for digital health companies and for obviously for biotherapeutic companies.
I was going to say 2025 should be better than 2024 and certainly better than 2022 and 2023. And so 2025 being back, we're back.
We're back, baby.
The-
I'll ask you all a quick hit. Oh, go ahead, Sophia.
I was going to say the one last thought I have is I think consumer sentiment in healthcare is at an all-time low. And there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the system. And there's no better way of impacting the system than coming and building companies and trying to impact it from the ground up. So super excited to meet entrepreneurs that are thinking about how we should re-envision our healthcare system.
I love that one.
Great.
Yeah. All right. With that, please come. If you're building a company in
Hmm.
healthcare, life science space, please come talk to us at Bessemer. We'd love to talk with you. Thanks for listening.